I mostly read public domain books here on Glenn Reads Books to You, and they were written a long time ago, so they're usually racist, or sexist, or bigoted, but in there somewhere is a story, and that's why those stories are famous. Other times, I read works from independent authors, and they're delightfully not racist, but they might have adult language or adult situations, like, making sex. So that's your warning, but I'm sure you're grown up enough to handle it. Don't write to me complaining. It's a beautiful sunny Saturday. Maybe I'll go out to my white trash pool and soak around. Oh, son of a bitch! All right, sit down. I was just going to go out to my pool and soak in the beautiful waters, along with a bunch of White Claws I throw in there. They just kind of bounce around, then I bounce around until I get close to a White Claw, and then I open one up, and then I just sit there and drink it and soak in the water. But no, you decided to show up. Welcome to the Glenn Reads Books to You mansion. It's a fun little bit where I pretend to live in a mansion and not just recording in my basement. This is where I read the hottest public domain books and short stories. This week, we're going to continue to read Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. You want to hear about him? Sure, I stole this from Wikipedia. Robert Louis Stevenson, Balfour Stevenson, was born the 13th of November, 1850, and died the 3rd of December, 1894. Oh, he was a Scottish essayist and poet and travel writer. He is best known for works such as Treasure Island, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Kidnapped, and The Child's Garden of Verses. Born and educated in Edinburgh, Stevenson suffered from serious bronchial trouble for much of his life, but continued to write prolifically and travel widely in defiance of his poor health. He settled in Samoa, where, alarmed at increasing European and American influence in the South Sea Islands, his writing turned from romance and adventure fiction toward a darker realism. He died of a stroke in his island home in 1894 at the age of 44. Want to hear some fun facts I stole from mentalfloss.com? The violence was shocking for the time period. Consider the scene where Jim watches as Silver hurls his crutch into the back of a disloyal crew member. Whether he were injured much or little, none could ever tell. Like enough to judge from the sound, his back was broken on the spot, but he had not given time given him to recover. Silver, agile as a monkey, without even a leg or a crutch, was on top of him the next moment and twice buried his knife up to the hilt into the defenseless body. From my place of ambush, I could hear him pant aloud as he struck the blows. And then that's it for that. So we just got to read a passage and assume that that's the most violent thing they've ever experienced back when this was written. Stevenson's father made numerous suggestions that ended up in the book. Thomas Stevenson loved pirate tales, and he gave his son some helpful advice. He suggested that Ben Gunn, the sailor marooned on Treasure Island, be a religious fanatic rather than a tormented soul, and that Captain Flint's vessel be named the Walrus. He also came up with one of the book's pivotal scenes in which Jim hides in an apple barrel and overhears Silver's plan to mutiny. When Treasure Island came out in book form, Stevenson's original map was printed along with the signature of Captain Flint, forged by none other than Thomas Stevenson. Oh my God. The grandfather clock hasn't gone off telling me to shut up and start reading the book, so I guess I got room for another one. Long John is one of the truly great characters in classic literature. Silver is a complicated villain who charms the reader just as he charms young Jim. The one-legged captain is whip-smart and frequently funny, uttering lines like "shiver me timbers" and taunting his parrot on his shoulder. Captain Flint, he's a jaded man and a former seaman of the Royal Navy who lost his leg fighting for the Empire. Okay, well with that, there's the clock. Why don't we go down to the library and continue reading this book? All right, why don't you take a seat? The longer you stay here and I have to read, the longer it takes for me to get drunk in my above-ground white trash pool. I strike the Jolly Roger. I had scarce gained a position in the bowsprit when the flying jib, it's just filled with words I don't understand, flapped and filled upon the other tack. With a report like a gun, the schooner trembled to her keel under the reverse, but the next moment, the other sail still drawing, the jib flapped back again and hung idle. No idea what just happened there. That's a beautifully crafted sentence. I should probably learn more about boats before I read something like this. This had nearly tossed me off into the sea, and now I lost no time, crawled back along the bowsprit, and tumbled head foremost on the deck. I was on the lee side of the forecastle, again, no idea, and the mainsail, I can only guess what that is, which was still drawing, concealed me from a certain portion of the afterdeck. Not a soul has to be seen. The planks, which had not been swabbed since the mutiny, bore the print of many feet. And an empty bottle, broken by the deck, tumbled and to and fro like a live thing in these scuppers. Don't know what a scupper is. Suddenly, the Hispaniola came right into the wind. The jibs behind me cracked aloud, the rudder slammed to, and the whole ship gave a sickening heave and shudder. And at that same moment, the main boom swung inward, and the sheet groaning in the blocks, and showed me the lee after deck. There were, the first three paragraphs. No idea what just happened. There were two watchmen, sure enough, red cap on his back, as stiff as a handspike, with his arms stretched out like those of a crucifix, and his teeth showing through his open lips. Israel Hands, propped against the bulwarks, his chin on his chest and his hands laying open before him on the deck. His face is white, under its tan as a tallow candle. And while the ship kept bucking and sliding like a vicious horse, the sails filling, now on one track, now on the other, and the boom swinging to and fro till the mast groaned aloud under the strain. And now and again, too, there would come a cloud of light sprays over the bulwark and the heavy blow of the ship's bows against the swell. So much heavier weather was made of it, burp, by this great rigged ship than my homemade lopsided corsicle, whatever, and now gone to the bottom of the sea. At every jump of the schooner, the red cap slipped to and fro, but what was ghastly to behold, neither his attitude nor his fixed teeth, disclosing grin, was anyways disturbed by rough usage. At every jump, too, hands appeared more to sink into himself and to settle down upon the deck, his feet sliding the farther out, and the whole body canting toward the stern, so that his face became, little by little, hid from me, and at last could see nothing beyond his ear and the frayed ringlet of one whisker. At the same time, I observed, round both of them, splashes of dark blood upon the planks, and began to feel sure that they had killed each other in their drunken wrath, while I was thus looking and wondering, in a calm moment, when the ship was still. Israel Hands turned partly around with a low moan, writhed himself back into position in which I could see him first. The moan, which told of pain and deadly weakness, and the way in which his jaw hung open, went right to my heart. But when I remembered the talk I had overheard from the apple barrel, all pity left me. I walked aft until I reached the main mast. Come aboard, Mr. Hands, I said ironically. He rolled his eyes around heavily, but he was too far gone to express surprise. All he could do was utter one word: brandy. Well, it occurred to me there was no time to lose, and the dodging of the boom as it once more lurched across the deck, I slipped aft and down the companion stairs into the cabin. It's such a scene of confusion you can hardly fancy. All the lock-fast places had been broken open in a quest of the chart. The floor was thick with mud where ruffians had sat down to drink or consult after waiting in the marshes around their camp. The bulkheads, all painted in clear white and beaded round the gilt, bore a pattern of dirty hands. Dozens of empty bottles clinked together in corners rolling in the ship, and the doctor's medical books lay open on the table, half of the leaves gutted out, I suppose, for pipe lights, and in the midst of all this, lamps still cast a smoky glow, obscure and brown as umber. I went into the cellar, all the barrels gone, and of the bottles, most surprising number had been drunk out and thrown away. Certainly, since the mutiny began, not a man of them could have been sober. Foraging about, found a bottle with some brandy left for Hands, and for myself I routed out some biscuit, some pickled fruits, and a great bunch of raisins, and a piece of cheese. With these I came on deck and put down my own stock behind the rudder head and well out of the coxswain's reach, which went forward to the water breaker and had a good deep drink of water. And then, not till then, gave Hands the brandy. Well, he must have drunk a gill before he took the bottle from his mouth. He said, by thunder, I wanted some o' that. Yeah. And I sat down already in my corner and began to eat. Much hurt? I asked him. Yeah, he grunted, or rather, I might say he barked. If that doctor was aboard, he said, I'd be right enough in a couple of turds, but I don't have no manner of luck. You see, that's what's the matter with me. And as for the swab, he's as good as dead, he is, he added, indicating the man with the red cap. He weren't no seaman anyhow. And where mought you have come from? Well, said I've come aboard to take possession of this ship, Mr. Hands, and you'll please regard me as your captain until further notice. Oh, he looked at me sourly enough, but said nothing. Some of the color had come back in his cheeks, though he still looked very sick, and still continued to slip out and settle down. The ship banged about. By the by, I continued, I can't have these colors, Mr. Hands, and by your leave, I'll strike them. Better none than these. And again, dodging the boom, I ran to the color lines, handed down their cursed black flag, and chucked it overboard. God save the king, said I, waving my cap. Oh, and there's an end to Captain Silver. He watched me keenly and slyly, his chin all the while on his breast. I reckon, he said at last, I reckon, Captain Hawkins, you'll get ashore now? Suppose we talks? Why, yes, said I, with my heart and Mr. Hands. Say on, and I went back to my meal with a good appetite. Oh, this man, he began, nodding feebly at the corpse. O'Brien were his name. Oh, a rank Islander. Irelander. It's Ireland, but it's Irelander. And this man, and he got me canvas over here, meaning for sailor back. Well, he's dead now, he is. As dead as bilge, And who's to sail the ship? No, I don't see. Without I gives you a hint, you ain't the man, as far as I could tell. Now, look here. You gives me food and drink. Oh, and an old scarf. And an handkerchief. Not looking that up. To tie my wound up. No, it's just a handkerchief. You do. And I'll tell you how to sail her. And that's about square all around, I take it. Well, I'll tell you one thing, says I. I'm not going back to Captain Kidd's anchorage. I mean, to get to the North Inlet and to beach her quietly there. To be sure you did, he cried. Why, I ain't sich an infernal lubber after all. I can see, can't I? Yeah, and I've tried my fling, I have, and I've lost. And it's you that has wind of me. North Inlet? Why, I haven't no choice. Not I. I'd help you sail her up to Execution Dock, by thunder, so I would. Well, as it seemed to me, there was some sense in this. We struck out bargain on the spot, and in 3 minutes I had the Hispaniola sailing easily before the wind along the coast of Treasure Island, with good hopes of turning the northern point ere noon and beating down again as North Inlet began high water. When we might beach her safely and wait till the subsiding tide permitted us to land. Well, I lashed the tiller and went below to my own chest where I got the soft silk handkerchief of my mother's. And with this, and with my aid, Hands bound up the great bleeding stab he had received in the thigh, and after he had eaten a little and had a swallow or two more of brandy, I began to pick up visibly and sat straighter up and spoke louder and clearer, and I looked in every way, another man. Well, the breeze served us admirably. We skimmed before it like a bird. The coast of the inlet flashing by and the view changing every minute. Soon we were past the high lands and bowling beside low, sandy country, sparsely dotted with dwarf pines. And we were beyond that again, and we had turned the corner into the rocky hill that ends the island on the north. Well, I was greatly elated with my new command, and I pleased with the bright, sunshiny weather and these different prospects of the coast. I had now plenty of water and good things to eat. Oh, and my conscience, what had smitten me hard from my desertion, was quieted by the great conquest I had made. I should, I think, have had nothing left in me to desire but for the eyes of the coxswain as they followed me derisively about the deck, and the odd smile that appeared continually on his face. It was a smile that had in it something both of pain and weakness. A haggard old man smile. But there was, besides that, a grain of derision, a shadow of treachery in his expression as he craftily watched me at my work. Next chapter, Israel Hands. The wind serving us to a desire now hauled into the west. We could run so much easier from the northeast corner of the island to the mouth of the North Inlet, only as we had no power to anchor and dared not beach her till the tide had flowed a good deal farther. Time hung on our hands. The coxswain told me how to lay the ship to, and after a good many trials I succeeded, and we both sat in silence over another meal. Captain, he said at length, with that same uncomfortable smile, here's my old shipmate, O'Brien. Suppose you was to heave him overboard. I ain't particular as a rule, but I don't take no blame for settling his hash. But I don't reckon him ornamental now, do you? I'm not strong enough, and I don't like the job. There he lies for me, said I. Well, this is an unlucky ship, this Hispaniola, Jim. He went on blinking. There's a power of men been killed in the Hispaniola. A sight, poor seamen dead and gone since you and me took the ship to Bristol. I had seen such dirty luck. Not I. There was this here O'Brien now. He's dead, ain't he? Well, now, I'm no scholar, but you're a lad as can read and figure, and put it straight. Do you take it as a dead man is dead for good, or do he come alive again? You can kill the body, Mr. Hands, but not the spirit. You must know that already, I replied. O'Brien there is in another world, and he may be watching us. Ah, says he. Well, that's unfortunate. It appears if killing parties was a waste of time. Howsoever, whatever, spirits don't reckon for much. By what I've seen, I'll chance it with the spirits, Jim. And now, you've spoke up free, and I'll take it kind if you'd step down into that cabin and get me, shiver me timbers. I can't hit the name on it. Well, you get me a bottle of wine, Jim. Oh, and here's brandy, too, for strong my head. Now, the coxswain's hesitation seemed to be unnatural, And as for the notion of his preferring wine to brandy, I entirely disbelieved it. The whole story was a pretext. He wanted me to leave the deck. So much was plain, but with what purpose I could in no way imagine. His eyes never met mine. They kept wandering to and fro, up and down, now with a look to the sky, now with a flittering glance upon the dead O'Brien. All the time he kept smiling and putting his tongue out in a most guilty, embarrassed manner. Really, he stuck his tongue out like a child, so that a child could have told that he was bent on some deception. I was prompt with my answer, however, for I saw where my advantage lay. And with what fellow so densely stupid, I could easily conceal my suspicions to the end. Some wine, I said. Far better when you have white or red. Well, I reckon it's about the blessed same to me, shipmate, he replied. So it's strong and plenty of it. What's the odds? All right, I answered. I'll bring you port, Mr. Hands, but I'll have to dig for it. With that, I scuttled down the companion with all the noise I could, slipped off my shoes, ran quietly along the sparred galley, mounted a forecastle ladder, and popped my head out of the forward companion. Don't know what any of that meant. I knew he would not expect to see me there, wherever the hell that is, yet I took every precaution possible, and certainly the worst of my suspicions proved too true. He had risen from his position to his hands and knees, and though his leg obviously hurt him pretty sharply when he moved, for I could hear him stifle a groan, yet it was at a good rattling rate that he trailed himself across the deck, and in half a minute he had reached the port scuppers and picked out of a coil of rope, a long knife, and a rather short dirk, discolored to the hilt with blood. He looked upon it for a moment, thrusting forth his underjaw, tried to point upon his head, and then, hastily concealing it in the bosom of his jacket, trundled back again into the old place against the bulwark. This was all I required to know. Israel could move about. He is now armed, and if he had been at so much trouble to get rid of me, it was plain that I was meant to be the victim. What would he do afterwards? Whether he would try to crawl right across the island from the North Inlet to the camp among the swamps, or whether he would fire Long Tom, thrusting that his own comrades might come to help him, was, of course, more than I could say. Yet I felt sure that I could trust him at one point, since in that our interests jumped together, and that was the disposition of the schooner. We both desired to have her stranded safe enough in a sheltered place so that when the time came, we could be off again, as little labor and danger as might be. Until that was done, I considered that my life would be certainly spared. Well, I was thus turning the business over my mind. I had not been idle with my body. I had stolen back to the cabin, slipped once more into my shoes, and laid my hand at random on the wine bottle. And now, with this for an excuse, I made my reappearance on the deck. Hands lay as I had left him, all fallen together in a bundle with his eyelids lowered as though he were too weak to bear the light. How he looked up, however, at my coming, knocked the neck off the bottle like a man who had done the same thing often, and he took a good swig with his favorite toast. Here's luck. And then he lay quiet for a while then, pulling out a stick of tobacco, and begged me to cut him a quid. Cut me a jank of that, he said, for I haven't no knife and hardly enough strength, so be as I had. Jim, I reckon I misstays. Cut me a quid, as it'll be likely at last. Lad, for I am long home, make no mistake. Well, said I, I'll cut you some tobacco, but if I was you and thought myself so badly, I would go to my prayers like a Christian man. Why? Said he. Now tell me why. Why? I cried. You were just asking me how about the dead, and you've broken your trust. You've lived in sin and lies and blood. There's a man you've killed lying at your feet this moment. And you ask me why? For God's mercy, Mr. Hands, that's why. I spoke with little heat, thinking of the bloody dirk he had hidden in his pocket and designed in his ill thoughts to end with. He, for his part, took a great draught of wine and spoke with the most unusual solemnity. For 30 years, he said, I've sailed the seas and have seen good and bad, better and worse, fair and weather and foul, provisions running out, knives going, and what not. Well, I tell you, I've never seen good come o' greatness yet. Him that strikes first is my fancy. Dead men don't bite, them's my views. Amen, so be it. And now, you look here, he added, suddenly changing his tone. We've got about enough of this foolery. The tide's made it good enough by now, and you may just take my orders, Captain Hawkins, and we'll sail slap in and be done with it. Okay, well, not a lot of that made sense, but what does make sense is taking a break to go down to the basement where I can tell you about the latest upcoming books from Penguin Random House. I'll see you down. Oh, there you are. Why don't you take a seat over there in that folding chair underneath that naked light bulb, while I stand here underneath this naked light bulb and play my guitar for you. I'm trying to make the basement a little more cozy, so you can see I put a little throw rug there right between us. Isn't that cute? So now it feels a little more comfy in here, and you're not going to get all weird as I let you know about Lies and Weddings by Kevin Kwan. It's a novel. You want to hear about it? New York Times bestseller, most anticipated book. The New York Times, the Washington Post, Time Entertainment Weekly, Cosmopolitan, CNN, Burp, Lit Hub, Minneapolis Star and Tribune, Reader's Digest, Book Riot, She Reads, and Pure Wow, Publishers Weekly, from the ironic, internationally best-selling author of Crazy Rich Asians trilogy. I didn't know it was a trilogy. A forbidden affair erupts volcanically amid a decadent tropical wedding in this outrageous comedy of manners. Imagine Crazy Rich Asians mated with Saltburn, and you got Lies and Weddings, a heavenly summertime read, says Plum Sykes from New York Times bestselling author of Bergdorf Blondes. This New York Times bestselling author thing. I say it all the time. I'm not going to keep saying it. It's horseshit. Rufus Lewing Gresham, future Earl of Gresham Brewery and son of former Hong Kong supermodel, has a problem. The legendary Gresham Trust has been depleted by decades of prolificate spending. I don't have to say words. Doesn't matter anymore. And behind all the magazine covers and Instagram stories, manners, and yachts lies nothing more than a gargantuan mountain of debt. The only solution put forth by Rufus's scheming mother is for Rufus to attend his sister's wedding at a luxury eco-resort, a veritable who's who of sultans, barons, and oligarchs, and seduce a woman with money. Should he marry Celine de Courcy, a French hotel heiress with honey blonde tresses and a royal bloodline? Should he pursue Martha Dung, the tattooed venture capital genius who passes out billions like lollipops? Or should he follow his heart, betray his family, squander his legacy, and finally confess his love to the literal girl next door, the humble daughter of a doctor, Eden Tar? Oh, and the volcanic eruption burns through the nuptials, and the hot mic exposes a secret tryst. The Gresham family plans, and their reputation goes up in flames. Can the once great dukedom rise from the ashes, or will a secret tragedy, hidden for 2 decades, reveal a shocking twist? In a globe-trotting tale that takes us from the black sand beaches of Hawaii to the skies of Marrakesh, from the glitzy bachelor pads of Los Angeles to the inner sanctums of England's oldest family estates, Kevin Kwan unfurls a juicy, hilarious, sophisticated, and thrillingly plotted story of love, money, murder, sex, and the lies we tell about them all. Well, that's Lies and Weddings, a novel by Kevin Kwan. That sounds pretty weird. You can get it for $29 in hardcover, May 21st. May, this is supposed to be a new book. May 21st? Okay, whatever. Apparently I've gone back in time. You can get it from Amazon, Barnes & Noble Books, AmillionBookshop.org, Hudson Booksellers, Powell's, Target, and for people that'll never live a life like this, they can find this in the hollowed aisles of Walmart. Well, at that, I feel pretty poor, especially when I'm trying to get through this to go out to a pool that's above ground made of vinyl. Makes me think that I'll never live a life like this. Written by Kevin Kwan, the author of 3 books of Crazy Rich Asians. Why don't we go back upstairs and try to forget that we ever learned about this book? Well, there you go. Why don't you take a seat? We'll get back at it so I can get in my pool. All told, we had scarce 2 miles to run, but the navigation was delicate, and the entrance to this northern anchorage was not only narrow and shoal, not looking it up, but lay east and west, so that the schooner must be nicely handled to be got in. I think I was good, prompt, subaltern, and I am very sure that Hans was an excellent pilot, for we went about and dodged in, shaving the banks with a certainty and a neatness that were a pleasure to behold. Scarcely had we passed the heads before the land closed around us, and the shores of the North Inlet were as thickly wooded as those southern in Anchorage. But the space was longer and narrower and more like what in truth it was, an estuary of river. Right before us at the southern end, we saw the wreck of the ship in the last stages of dilapidation. It had been a great vessel of 3 masts, but had lain so long exposed to the injuries of the weather that it was hung about with great webs of dripping seaweed. And on the deck of it, short bushes had taken root, now flourished thick with waters. It was a sad sight, but it showed us that the anchorage was calm. Now, said Hans, look there. There's a pet bit for a beach, for a ship in. Fine, flat sand. Never a cat's paw, trees all around it, and flowers a-blowing like a gardening on that old ship. And once beached, I inquired, how shall we get her off again? Why, so, he replied. You take the line ashore, there, on the other side of that low water, and take a turn about. One of them is the big pines. Bring it back in. Take a turn around the capstan, and lie for the tide. Come high water, all hands take a pull upon the line, and off she comes, as sweet as nature. And now, boy, you stand by. We're nearer a bit now, and she's too much way over. Starboard a little, so steady. Starboard, labored a little, steady, steady. So he issued his commands, which I breathlessly obeyed, till all of a sudden he cried, Now, my hearty luff, and I put the helm hard up, and the Hispaniola swung round rapidly and ran stem on for the low wooded shore. The excitement of these last maneuvers had somewhat interfered with the watch I had kept Hithro, sharply enough upon the coxswain, and even then I was still too much interested in waiting for the ship to touch that I had quite forgot the peril that hung over my head and stood craning over the starboard bulwarks and watching the ripples spreading wide before the bows. I might have, fallen without a struggle for my life, had not a sudden disquietude seized upon me, made me turn my head. Perhaps I had heard a creak or seen his shadow moving with the tail of my eye. Perhaps it was instinct, like a cat's. But sure enough, when I looked round, there was Hans, already halfway toward me with the dirk in his right hand. Oh, we must have both cried out aloud when our eyes met, but while mine was the shrill cry of terror, his was a roar of fury, like a charging bully's. A bully, like a jerk that beats people up? At the same instant, he threw himself forward, and I leapt sideways toward the bows. Oh, as I did so, I let go of the tiller, which sprang sharp to leeward. And I think this saved my life, for it struck Hans across the chest and stopped him. For the moment, dead. Before I could, recover, I was safe out of the corner where he had trapped me with all the deck to dodge about. Just forward of the mainmast, I stopped. I drew a pistol from my pocket, took cool aim. Though he had already turned and was once more coming directly after me, burp, and threw the trigger. The hammer fell, and there followed neither flash nor sound. The priming was useless with seawater. I cursed myself for my neglect. Why had not I, long before, reprimed and reloaded my only weapons? Well, then I should not have been as now, a mere fleeing sheep before this butcher. Wounded as he was, it was wonderful how fast he could move. Really, he's just like appreciating, that guy could really move. It's like a lot of fun to watch. He could, his grizzled hair tumbling over his face, and his face itself as red ensign with the haste and fury. I had no time to pry my other pistol, nor indeed much inclination, for I was sure it'd be useless. One thing I saw plainly, I must not simply retreat before him, or he would speedily hold me boxed into the bows. As moments since he had nearly boxed me in the stern, once so caught, and 9 or 10 inches of the blood-stained dirk would be my last experience on this side of eternity. I placed my palms against the mainmast, which was of a goodish bigness. Those aren't real words, goodish bigness, and waited every nerve upon the stretch. Seeing that I meant to dodge, he also paused, and a moment or two passed in feints on his part, the corresponding movements upon mine. It was such a game as I had often played at home about the rocks of the Black Hill Cove, but never before, you may be sure, with such a wildly beating heart as now. Still, as I say, it was a boy's game, and I thought I could hold my own against it as an elderly seaman with a wounded thigh. Indeed, my courage had begun to rise so high that I allowed myself a few darting thoughts on what would be the end of the affair, and while I certainly saw that I could spin it out for long, I saw no hope of any ultimate escape. Well, while things stood thus, suddenly the Hispaniola struck, staggered ground for an instant in the sand, and then, swift as a blow, canted over the port side till the deck stood at an angle about, 45 degrees, and about a puncheon of water splashed into the scupper holes and lay in a pool between the deck and the bulwark. We were both of us capsized in a second. Both of us rolled almost together into the scuppers, the dead red cap with his arms still spread out, tumbling stiffly after us. So near were we, indeed, that my head came against the coxswain's foot with a crack that made my teeth rattle. Blow and all, I was first afoot again, for Hans had got involved with the dead body. The sudden canting of the ship made the deck no place for running on. I had to find some new way of escape, and that upon an instant, for my foe was almost touching me. Quick as I thought, I sprang to the mizzen shrouds, don't know what that is, rattled up hand over hand, and did not draw a breath till I was seated on the cross tees. I had been saved by being prompt. The dirk had struck not half a foot below me as I pursued my way upward flight. There stood Israel Hands with his mouth open and his face upturned to mine, a perfect statue of surprise and disappointment. Now that I had a moment to myself, I lost no time in changing the priming of my pistol, and then, having one ready for service and to make sure it's doubly sure, I proceeded to draw the load of another and recharge it afresh from the beginning. My new employment struck hands all of a heap, and he began to see the dice going against him. And after an, obvious hesitation, he also hauled himself heavily into the shrouds, and with the dirk in his teeth, began slowly and painfully to mount. It cost him no time of end and groans to haul his wounded leg behind him, and I had quietly finished my arrangements before he obeyed much more than a third of the way up. Then, with a pistol in either hand, I addressed him. One more step, Mr. Hands, said I. I'll blow your brains out. Dead men don't bite, you know, I added with a chuckle. Oh, he stopped instantly, and I could see by working of his face that he was trying to think that the process was so slow and laborious that in my newfound security, I laughed out loud. And at last, with a solo or two, he spoke, his face still wearing the same expression of extreme perplexity. In order to speak, he had to take the dagger from his mouth, but in all else he remained unmoved. Jim, says he, I reckon we're fouled, you and me, and we'll have to sign articles. I'd have had you but for that lurch, but I don't have no luck, not I. And I reckon I'll have to strike, which comes hard. You see, for a master mariner to a ship's yonker like you, Jim. And I was drinking in his words and smiling away, as conceited as a cock upon a wall, when, in a breath, back went his right hand over his shoulder. Something sang like an arrow through the air, and I felt a blow, and then a sharp pang. And there I was, pinned by the shoulder to the mast. Oh, in horrid pain and surprise at the moment, I scarce say that it was my own volition. I'm sure it was not without a conscious aim. Both my pistols went off, and both escaped out of my hands. They did not fall alone. With a choked cry, the coxswain loosed his grasp upon the shrouds and plunged headfirst into the water. Next chapter, Pieces of 8. Owing to the cant of the vessel, the masts hung far out over the water, and from my perch on the cross trees I had nothing below me but the surface of the bay. Hands, who was not so far up, was in consequence nearer to the ship and fell between me and the bulwarks. He rose once to the surface in a lather of foam and blood, and then sank again for good. As the water settled, I could see him lying huddled together on the clean, bright sand in the shadow of the vessel's sides. A fish or two whipped past his body. Sometimes, by the quivering of the water, he appeared to move a little, as if he were trying to rise, but he was dead enough. For all that, being both shot and drowned, and was fish food for fish in every place where he had designed my slaughter. Burp. I was no sooner certain of this than I began to feel sick, faint, and terrified. The hot blood was running over my back and chest, and the dirk, where it had pinned my shoulder to the mast, seemed to burn like a hot iron. Yet it was not so much these real sufferings that distressed me. For these, it seemed to me, I could bear without a murmur. It was the horror I had upon my mind of falling from the cross trees into that still green water beside the body of the coxswain. I clung with both hands till my nails ached, and I shut my eyes as if to cover up the peril. Gradually, my mind came back again, my pulses quieted down to a more natural time, and I was once more in possession of myself. Well, it was my first thought to pluck forth the dirk, but either it stuck too hard or my nerve failed me, and I detested with a violent shudder. Oddly enough, for that very shudder did the business. The knife, in fact, had come the nearest in the world to missing me altogether. It held me by a mere pinch of skin. Oh, and this shudder tore away. The blood ran down faster, to be sure, but I was my own master again, and only tacked to the mast by my coat and shirt. These last I broke through with a sudden jerk, and then regained the deck by the starboard shrouds. For nothing in the world would I have again ventured, shaken as I was, upon the overhanging port shrouds, which Israel had so lately fallen. I went below and did what I could for my wound. It pained me a good deal, and still bled freely, but it was neither deep nor dangerous. Nor did it greatly gall me when I used my arm. Then I looked around me, and the ship was now, in a sense, my own. I began to think of clearing it from the last passenger, the dead man O'Brien. He had pitched as I have said, against the bulwarks, where he lay like some horrible, ungangly sort of puppet. Life-size indeed, but how different from life's color or life's comeliness. And in that position, I could easily have my way with him. Oh, gross. As the habit of tactical adventures had worn off almost all my terror for the dead, I took him by the waist, as if he had been a sack of bran, and with one good heave, tumbled him overboard. Okay, thank God. And he went in with a sounding plunge. The red cap came off and remained floating on the surface, and as soon as the splash subsided, I could see him and Israel lying side by side. How pithy. Both wavering with the tremulous movement of the water. O'Brien, though still quite a young man, was very bald. There he lay, with that bald head across the knees of the man who had killed him, and the quick fishes steering to and fro over both. Well, I was now alone upon the ship, and the tide had just turned. The sun was within so few degrees of setting that already the shadow of the pines upon the western shore began to reach right across the anchorage and fall in patterns on the deck. The evening breeze had sprung up, as though it was well warded off by the hill, and with the two peaks upon the east, the cordage had begun to sing a little softly to itself, and to the idle sails to rattle to and fro. Well, I began to see a danger to the ship. The jibs I speedily doused and brought tumbling to the deck, but the mainsail was a harder matter. Of course, with the schooner canted over, the boom had swung out aboard, and the cap of it, and a foot or two of sail, hung even under the water. Oh, I thought this made it still more dangerous, yet the strain was so heavy that I feared to meddle. Oh, at last I got my knife and cut the haylards. I have no idea what's going on. The peak dropped instantly. A great belly of loose canvas floated broad upon the water, and since, pull as I liked, I could not budge the downhaul. That was the extent to which I could accomplish. For the rest, Hispaniola must trust to luck like myself. Well, by this time, the whole anchorage had fallen into the shadow of the last rays, I remember, falling through a glade of the wood and shining bright as jewels on the flowery mantle of the wreck. I began to chill. The tide was rapidly fleeing seaward, and the schooner settling more and more on her beam ends. I scrambled forward and looked it over. It seemed shallow enough, the holding of the cut hawser in both hands for last security. I let myself drop softly overboard. The water scarcely reached my waist. The sand was firm and covered with ripple marks, and I waded ashore in great spirits, leaving the Hispaniola on her side, with the mainsail trailing wide upon the surface of the bay. About the same time, the sun went fairly down, and the breeze whistled low in the dusk among the tossing pines. At last, I was off the sea, nor had I returned thence empty-handed. There lay the schooner, clear at last from buccaneers and ready for our own men to board. It sounds like it's been capsized, if I'm not reading this right. And get to sea again. How? It sounds like it's like sideways. I had nothing nearer my fancy than to get home to the stockade and boast of my achievements. Possibly I might be blamed a bit for my truantry, but the recapture of the Hispaniola was a clenching answer. And I hope that even Captain Smollett would confess that I had not lost my time. So thinking, and in famous spirits, I began to set my face homeward for the blockhouse and my companions. I remembered that the most easterly of the rivers which drained into Captain Kidd's anchorage ran from the two peaked hills upon my left, and I bent my course in that direction, and I might pass the stream while it was small. The wood was pretty open. And keeping along the lower spurs, I had soon turned the corner of that hill and not long after waded to the mid-calf across the watercourse. This brought me near to where I had encountered Ben Gunn, the Maroon, and I walked more circumspectly, keeping my eye on every side. The dusk had come nigh hand completely, and as I opened out the cleft between the two peaks, I became aware of the wavering glow against the sky, where, as I judged, the man of the island was cooking his supper before a roaring fire. And yet I wondered, in my heart, that he should show himself so careless. For if I could see this radiance, might it not reach the eyes of Silver himself, where he camped upon the shore along the marshes? Gradually, the night fell blacker. It was all I could do to guide myself, even roughly, toward my destination. The double hill behind me and the spyglass on my right hand loomed faint and fainter. The stars were few and pale, and in the low ground where I wandered, I kept tripping among bushes and rolling into sandy pits. Suddenly, a kind of brightness fell about me. I looked up. Pale glimmer of moonbeams had alighted on the summit of the spyglass, and soon after I saw something broad and silvery moving low down among the trees, and knew the moon had risen. With this to help me, I passed rapidly over what remained of my journey, sometimes walking, sometimes running, and patiently drew near the stockade. Yet, as I began to thread the grove that lies before it, I was not so thoughtless, but that I had slacked my pace and went a trifle warily. Oh, it would have been a poor end to my adventures to get shot down by my own party in mistake. The moon was climbing higher and higher. Its light began to fall here and there in masses. Though the more open districts through the more open districts of the wood, the right in front of me, a glow of a different color appeared among the trees. Oh, it's red and hot, and now and again is a little darkened, as it were, the embers of a bonfire smoldering. For the life of me, I could not think what it might be. At last, I came right down upon the borders of the clearing. The western end was already steeped in moonshine. Oh, the rest, the blockhouse itself, still lay in a black shadow, checkered with long silvery streaks of light. On the other side of the house, an immense fire had burned itself into the clear embers, and the shed, a steady red reverberation, contrasted strongly with the mellow paleness of the moon. There was not a soul stirring, nor a sound beside the noises of the breeze. I stopped, with much wonder in my heart, and perhaps a little terror also. It had not been our way to build great fires. We were, indeed, by the captain's orders, somewhat inwardly, of firewood, and I began to fear that something had gone wrong while I was absent. That one almost got me. I stole round by the eastern end, keeping close in shadow at a convenient place, where the darkness was thickest, across the palisade. To make assurance surer, I got upon my hands and knees and crawled without a sound toward the corner of the house, and as I drew nearer, my heart was suddenly and greatly lightened. It was not a pleasant noise in itself, as I have often complained of at other times, but just what it was like music to hear my friends snoring together. It's so loud and peaceful in their sleep. Well, the sea cry of the watch, that beautiful all's well, never fell more reassuringly on my ear. In the meantime, there's no doubt about one thing. They kept it in for this bad watch. If it had been Silver and his lads that were now creeping in on them, not a soul would have been daybreak. That was what it was, thought I, to have the captain wounded. And again I blamed myself sharply for leaving them in that danger with so few to mount guard. By this time I had got to the door and stood up, and all the dark within, so that I could distinguish nothing by the eye. As for sounds, there was a steady drone of the snorers and a small occasional noise, flickering or pecking, that I could in no way account for. With my arms before me, I walked steadily in. I should lie down in my own place, I thought, with a silent chuckle, and enjoy their faces when they found me in the morning. My foot struck something, yielding. It's the sleeper's leg. And he turned and groaned, but without waking. And then all of a sudden a shrill voice broke forth out of the darkness. Pieces eight! Pieces eight! How many more times? Pieces eight! Pieces eight! Pieces eight! And so forth, without pause or change, like the clacking of a tiny mill. Silver's parrot. Captain Flint. It was she whom I had heard pecking at the piece of bark. It was she, keeping better watch than any human being, who thus announced my arrival with her wearisome refrain. I had no time left to recover. At the sharp clipping tone of the parrot, the sleepers awoke and sprang up, and with a mighty oath, the voice of Silver cried, "Who goes?" I turned to run, struck violently against one person, recoiled, and ran full into the arms of a second, who, for his part, closed upon and held me tight. "Bring a torch, Dick," said Silver, when my capture was thus assured, and one of the men left the log house and presently returned with a lighted brand. That seems like a good place to stop. Why don't we wrap this up so I can go swim in my white trash pool, and we can talk about what the hell we just read down in the smoking room. Well, there you go. Why don't you take a seat and go ahead. Take the top part off that baboon's skull on the table and see that it's filled with cigarettes, which you can have one. I don't care if you're underage. It's fine. My wife's birds. What do we learn in these chapters? We got to see Jim changing a little more dramatically this time. Up to this point, he still kind of holds on to his civilized upbringing by respecting authority and trusting that they will manage the situation against the lawless pirates. And though he still holds on to the opinion from the shootout in the last episode, he's getting frustrated that his leaders are so focused in getting that money that they've lost sight of the importance of just getting home or having control of the ship. So that's what starts out as a bizarre quest to cut the ship loose, which makes no sense if you're trying to get home, turns him into demanding to be the new captain. I get the impression that he's disappointed that the pirates didn't even notice that they were drifting out to sea because they can't keep their shit together long enough to stop drinking. Instead, Israel is laying around on the deck with a dead Irishman that he's getting all xenophobic about. And here we see Jim change quickly. He starts out trying to respect the dead and refuses to just throw the corpse overboard. But after the fight with Israel, he's hardened. He hates looking at corpses now. And he uncharacteristically just tosses it overboard without any ceremony or emotion and kind of just makes a lot of comments about how, oh, that dead guy's bald. I'd like to see Jim go kind of dark and just leave everyone behind. Maybe taking Tom Hanks with him back to civilization, but I doubt that's going to happen because he's already back at the base and it looks like he just got captured. So there goes my fantasy. Well, that was a lot of fun. I'm going to go to my pool now. So with that, thanks for listening, and maybe I'll see you next week. Well, it appears you found me in the part of the podcast I hate the most, where I tell you all about the places on the internet where you can find me. You can tell I hate this because of the sound effects making it sound like a stormy night in the drawing room of the damned. Now, there's that. Are you cool? I like cool people. It's the reason why I got involved in this business to begin with, just to meet cool people. Not losers. So if you're cool, feel free to go over to my website, nuzzlehouse.com. But if you go there, you get to hear some of the other stuff that I and my wife work on, like the Radio Mystery Theater show, where we try to recreate the same show that used to be on in the 70s, but they don't make any episodes anymore. So we make our own, and we just steal all their commercials. And also, just in a curious mind, we made a Christmas album. If you go to our link tree, you can see that we made a Christmas album. It's the first thing we did after getting married, which I think everyone should do when they get married, is start talking about the Christmas album they're going to make. And we're working on a new show where we give relationship advice by reading paranormal smut. And since I think you might be cool, you can always just email me directly, glenn.nuzzles@gmail.com. But don't email if you're a nerdlinger or a dork. Now, back to business. I can't believe I drank all of them already. There's got to be one left.